to another video here on Free Will Photos. Today what we're going to be doing is taking a look at the antique and the vintage filter. These are two filters that I get questions of which one should a person use on their photo. You got to stick to the end to find out which one I recommend and why. So let's go ahead and take a look at each of these filters. Here we are on the antique filter, and this is the only active filter that is going on in the photo right now. As you can see, we have some styles, and then we also have an antique drop down here where there's color. And essentially, these are LUTs that are on top of, or that are built into this particular filter, so you don't have to use the LUT filter. I want you to remember that these are LUTs. Just take a look at what it's doing to the highlights and the shadows as I transition between each one of these presets. I'm just going to go ahead and stop on this one because it doesn't really matter for demonstration purposes. Then we have the ability to control how bright it is. Obviously, this is just a brightness slider. Moving it up makes it brighter, moving it down makes it darker. I won't spend too much time on there. And then there's the fade filter, which is essentially just pulling up on the black point. Then, of course, you have saturation, which is going to be common among both of them. And that's just going to either desaturate the original color of your image. This isn't desaturating the actual color effect that you select here. This is just desaturating your original image. So that way it doesn't have to compete in those areas. So if I go with this New York and I pull up on the saturation, you can see that I have a lot of warmer tones in this image. I have the reds, the yellows, the darker green here, the skin tones of my family. But as I pull down on the saturation, you can see that now the warmer tones that are coming from the New York or even the Marcelli, I think I'm saying that right, this particular preset or LUT is really owning the color responsibility in the image. I'll leave it on New York, pull back my saturation because I think that some original color is always necessary in using the antique filter as well as the vintage filter. Then you come down to the bottom section here, and this is the film grain. And, you know, this is a stylistic choice. I personally think that if you want to add film grain, you're better off just removing all of this film grain and then adding a film grain filter and applying whatever film grain you want in this way, because you have complete control. You even get some selections of what type of film stock you want to use. Whereas with the antique filter, you just get an amount and a size slider. So if you want more flexibility, then I recommend using the film grain filter. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at the vintage filter. I'm going to turn it on, and you can see right away it does a very similar thing, except for the presets in here are a little bit more aggressive, where the antique filter was a little bit more subdued. It was more relaxed. We have the vintage filter that goes a little bit more aggressive in the creative style, if you will. And, you know, this is one of the main differences as well. So there's the fade slider that the antique filter comes with, but if you throw the vintage filter on, then you're going to get a little bit more of an aggressive LUT oversight, if you will. Now, you have an amount slider, and you can kind of blend this in. And what this is doing, it's similar to acting as an opacity slider. All right. It's just the intensity of how much of this LUT do you want added into your overall. So if you only want to blend it to about this far, then you're good. And then the saturation here is saturating the underlying layer. So if I pull down the amount, you can see that it's just saturating the underlying layer, which is the original image. So if I pull up on my amount again, I'm reintroducing this particular LUT or this overlay, if you will. And that's the style that it's giving me for the overall image. Now, again, I have film grain here. I don't recommend using film grain just because you're only limited to these two sliders. And this is a general rule of thumb when I'm working in ON1. I don't use the film grain filters that are built into effects because I get more flexibility from using an actual film grain effect on its own. Plus, if there's areas where I want to add this and not have it all over the image, now I get to mask in my film grain. I haven't found too many use cases of doing that, but I know that in the past that's been a thing. So the question is, which one of these should you use on your photos? And that really depends. If you are going for something that is a little bit more aggressive and you want something that's going to be punchy, then I recommend you go with a vintage filter. Now, if you want to go with something that's a little bit more subdued, relaxed, and it's going to kind of desaturate your image overall, it's not as punchy, not as strong, not as potent, if you will, then I would go with the antique filter. Now, my real answer to you is to go with your own creation. And the way that you do that is you grab a split tone, and you can, for the sake of the tutorial, I'm just going to go with the Oats preset style because everyone will have that. And then I can just push up on the amount and on both directions. And I'm already getting something that looks very similar to what I got with the antique filter, except for now I have this balance slider where I can choose which direction I want this to go in. So if I want something that's going to give me more of that vintage effect, then I can pull down the balance slider. Now, what I can also do here is I can add in my film grain, and now I'm getting more control. Now, the reason why I'm suggesting the split tone filter versus the antique or the vintage filter is purely because I can choose my own colors. So if this yellow or this golden brown, whatever this is, isn't really working for me, and I'm like, you know what, I really need this to be a darker orange or a peach, so to speak, then I can just pull the little crosshairs over into that area. And now I have complete creative control over my edit. And this is the reason why I suggest the split tone. You'll say, well, what about the fade filter? If I wanted to fade this, how do I do that? All I need to do is click on split tone, so that way the curves adjustment is going to go above my split tone. And then I just pull up on my black point here until I get that fade that I'm going for. Now, I would be careful with going this way because you're introducing white into the image, and that's what's actually happening. You're dampening the black pixels and allowing more of the white pixels to dominate you're allowing more of the white in the image to dominate all the way until you get to the top and it's pure white. So you want to be careful with this. However, if you pull up a little bit and maybe pull it in, you can get like a contrasty, faded look. And this, in my opinion, just gives me so much more flexibility and control. I can even come into my reds and maybe push those a little bit more if I needed to, pull them back and get like a more yellowish tone. You can go into the blues and pull the yellow tones down just a little bit. You could do all kinds of things, and these are all non-destructive. They're on their own layer, and you also have the ability to mask them wherever you want them to go. The split tone, the curves, and the film grain is what I would really recommend using over grabbing an antique or a vintage filter. These are great if you just don't know how to get the look that you're going for. I believe that everyone should understand how to use the split tone filter because there's just so many opportunities that are available here. And I haven't even started talking about blend modes. So just know that the split tone is the way to go. So hopefully you have a better understanding of using the antique or the vintage filter on your photos. If you got questions, leave them in the comment section below. If you need to use the antique or the vintage filters, now you know how to use them. So until next time, I want you to stay inspired and keep creating. Peace.